The sun cast long shadows across Pinewood as Colonel Marcus Wright turned his sleek black sedan onto Maple Street. After 15 years away serving his country, each familiar landmark stirred memories of a childhood both sweet and bitter. The "Welcome to Pinewood" sign, freshly painted yet unchanged in design since his youth, marked his official return to the place that had shaped him. Marcus adjusted his collar, the weight of his military decorations momentarily heavy on his chest. At 43, his close-cropped hair showed hints of silver at the temples, his dark skin weathered by deployments across 3 continents. The Distinguished Service Cross, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart he'd earned meant little here, where people once knew him simply as the Wright boy from Cedar Lane. He slowed as he passed the corner store where Mrs. Thompson had once refused to serve his father. It was now a trendy coffee shop. Progress, perhaps. His mother's voice echoed in his thoughts. Come back stronger, Marcus. Come back ready to make a difference. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Tanya. House is ready. Everyone's excited to see Colonel Big Shot. Marcus smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. He was home for his mother's 70th birthday, but something told him this visit would be more consequential than he'd planned. Marcus turned onto Cedar Lane, just 2 blocks from his family home, when flashing blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. He checked his speedometer, exactly 3 miles under the limit. With a resigned sigh, he pulled over, placed both hands visibly on the steering wheel, and lowered his window. Officer Pete Donovan approached, his swagger unmistakable even before Marcus could make out his face. Stocky and red-faced, with small eyes that darted suspiciously across Marcus's expensive car, Donovan rested his hand casually on his holster. License and registration, Donovan demanded without preamble, his voice sharp with unearned authority. May I ask why I've been stopped, officer? Marcus replied evenly, maintaining eye contact. Donovan's lip curled slightly. Tinted windows. Look too dark for state regulations. And your turn signal back there was late. Marcus knew both claims were false. His military-honed self-control kept his voice steady. I understand. My documents are in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now. As Marcus retrieved his papers, Donovan spotted the military ID alongside his license. His expression flickered but didn't soften. Visiting or passing through? Donovan questioned, examining the District of Columbia plates. Visiting family. My mother lives just down the block. I grew up here. Donovan handed back the documents with obvious reluctance. Don't recognize the name. You sure you're from Pinewood? A silver sedan with 2 white teenagers sped past, music blaring, going at least 15 over the limit. Donovan didn't even glance their way. Born and raised, Marcus confirmed. Wright family, Cedar Lane. My father was Pastor Wright at First Baptist. Wait here, Donovan ordered, returning to his patrol car with Marcus's license. Through his side mirror, Marcus watched Donovan make a call, gesturing animatedly. This wasn't just routine harassment. Something about Donovan's demeanor suggested personal investment, as if Marcus's mere presence had triggered something beyond the usual racial profiling. 5 minutes stretched to 15 as Marcus waited, watching Donovan in his rearview mirror. When the officer finally returned, another patrol car pulled up behind them. Step out of the vehicle, sir, Donovan commanded, his hand now firmly on his holster. On what grounds, officer? Marcus asked calmly, though his heart raced. We've had reports of a suspicious vehicle matching this description. Possible drug trafficking. Marcus knew the claim was absurd. Officer Donovan, I've provided valid identification and registration. There's no legal basis. Out of the car now. Donovan barked, unclipping his holster. Marcus complied with deliberate slowness, his military training evident in his precise movements. As he straightened to his full height, a commanding 6'2", Donovan seemed momentarily taken aback. Hands on the hood, legs spread, Donovan ordered, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. A small crowd began to gather on the sidewalk. Marcus recognized Mrs. Pearson from next door to his mother's house, her phone raised, recording. "This is unnecessary, officer," Marcus stated firmly. "I'm Colonel Marcus Wright, U.S. Army. I'm visiting my family." "Should have thought about that before you came rolling through with DC plates and an attitude," Donovan snapped, roughly patting him down. The second officer, whose nameplate read Rodriguez, approached with visible discomfort. "Pete, I don't think." "Shut it, Rodriguez. I've been tracking these operations for months." Donovan produced a small bag from his pocket. Well. What do we have here?" Marcus's blood ran cold. "That's not mine. You just planted evidence." Mrs. Pearson called out, "I got it all on video, Marcus. All of it." News spread through Pinewood with lightning speed. By nightfall, Marcus sat in his mother's living room surrounded by neighbors, former classmates, and community leaders. The video of his detention had already reached 50,000 views online. 20 years on the force, and Pete Donovan's finally been caught, said Raymond Jenkins, Marcus's childhood friend who now served on the city council. This isn't his first time. It's just the first time he picked on someone who could fight back properly. Tanya, Marcus's sister, passed around coffee as people shared stories. 3 young black men from the community college described identical stops on the same stretch of road. An elderly couple recounted their grandson's arrest with planted evidence, resulting in a plea deal that derailed his scholarship chances. "We've filed complaints for years," Mrs. Pearson explained, her hands trembling with anger. "The department claims insufficient evidence, or the cameras malfunction, or witnesses get intimidated." Marcus's military training kicked in, assess the situation, gather intelligence, formulate strategy. "We need more than just my incident," he concluded. "We need patterns, documentation, testimonies. If Officer Donovan is systematically violating rights, we need to prove it's not isolated." By midnight, they had 20 verified statements, a dozen videos, and a timeline of incidents stretching back 5 years. The operation was taking shape. Within 48 hours, Marcus walked into the Pinewood County Courthouse flanked by Raymond Jenkins and Patricia Zhou, a civil rights attorney who'd grown up 2 streets over from the Wright family. The chief of police had initially tried to smooth things over with a personal apology and an offer to handle the matter internally, but Marcus wasn't interested in backroom deals. Filing day, Patricia announced, carrying a thick folder of meticulously organized evidence. Wrongful detention, evidence tampering, pattern of discriminatory enforcement, civil rights violations. The clerk's eyes widened as Patricia placed the complaint on the counter. "This is naming half the department's leadership as complicit parties." "Because they are," Raymond stated firmly. "You don't get a bad apple without a rotting barrel." Outside, reporters gathered as word spread. Marcus stood straight-backed in his formal military uniform, his statement measured and precise. "This isn't about personal vindication. This is about equal protection under the law. Officer Donovan didn't see a decorated soldier returning home. He saw only the color of my skin and acted on prejudice rather than probable cause. That stops today." The police department spokesperson attempted damage control, citing Donovan's exemplary record, but the hashtag #PinewoodJustice was already trending, and 3 more victims had come forward with similar accounts. "Now comes the hard part," Patricia warned as they departed. "They'll fight this with everything they've got." The courtroom fell silent as Marcus took the witness stand, his military bearing unmistakable. Judge Eleanor Watkins, known for her no-nonsense approach, peered over her glasses at the proceedings. The room was packed, with community members filling every available seat. District Attorney Powell, representing Officer Donovan and the department, approached with practiced confidence. "Colonel Wright, isn't it possible you misinterpreted Officer Donovan's standard procedures as having racial motivation?" "No sir, it is not," Marcus replied firmly. When an officer falsely claims violations, ignores speeding vehicles with white occupants, and plants evidence during a stop that goes beyond standard procedure. Powell's smile tightened. That's quite an accusation. Do you have proof of this alleged planting of evidence? Patricia Zhou rose immediately. Your Honor, as submitted in Exhibit C, Mrs. Pearson's video clearly shows Officer Donovan removing something from his own pocket before claiming to find it on Colonel Wright's person. The video played on the courtroom screens. There was no mistaking the movement. Donovan shifted uncomfortably in his seat as murmurs rippled through the gallery. Furthermore, Marcus continued, we've provided testimonies from 23 citizens who experienced identical treatment on that same stretch of road. The statistical analysis shows that 94% of these stops involved black drivers, despite the town's demographic being only 27% black. Officer Donovan suddenly stood up. This is all lies. I was protecting this town while he was off playing soldier. Judge Watkins banged her gavel. Officer Donovan, control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt. No, Your Honor, Donovan shouted, red-faced, I want to know why everyone's taking his word over a sworn officer. The outburst was damning. Exactly as Patricia had predicted. 6 months after the trial, Marcus stood before the newly established Pinewood Community Oversight Board, addressing its diverse members. The case had ended with Donovan's termination and criminal charges, but Marcus had pushed for something more lasting than punishment. Today marks a new chapter for Pinewood, he announced, gesturing toward the police chief and mayor who sat uncomfortably nearby. Our department now requires body cameras that cannot be disabled, quarterly bias training, and civilian review of all stops and searches. Raymond Jenkins, now heading the Oversight Committee, nodded approvingly. One incident exposed decades of injustice. One person's stand created change for generations. Outside, children played freely on Cedar Lane, no longer taught to fear those sworn to protect them. Marcus watched, knowing his mother had been right all along. He had indeed come back stronger, and finally made that difference.